So it's March 6th, and Venus and Mars have both ingressed into Aquarius, which is an interesting transit for a number of reasons. First of all, Venus and Mars are perfectly conjunct right now, and they have been for a number of weeks. And there's a certain kind of a tension that happens when Venus and Mars are together because they're two polar opposite principles. There's a kind of a friction. I did a video about Venus, Mars, and Pluto together in Capricorn. Um, and now they have crossed over, they've moved signs, but that Venus Mars tension has been there the whole time, and it's just continuing over the ingress. And it's particularly interesting for I don't know. I'm going to show you the chart here before I go any further, so you can actually visualize what I'm talking about. Right, so this is the current chart. As you can see, March 5th, um, yesterday, they're at the 29th degree, the anaretic degree. Um, this is known as the killing degree. It's basically it's like the terminal point, the end point of a sign, and it's often a very kind of critical position because it's if a planet is at this position, it's about to make the transition into the next sign, and Mars specifically has a big change in dignity because it's exalted in Capricorn, and now that it's in Aquarius, it's it doesn't have any special dignity in Aquarius. Saturn is in its domicile in Aquarius. So all these planets, this whole stellium of Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all basically answering to Saturn now. Whereas before, when let's skip back, we had this Capricorn dynamic. We had this big Venus, Mars, Pluto thing happening, but Mars was coming out on top as being the planet that was the strongest in Capricorn. And now that we're in Aquarius, Saturn is the strongest contender. And it's also kind of interesting because we've got a stellium right now of 4 planets in Aquarius. I remember last year we had a even bigger stellium of planets in Aquarius. It was the biggest stellium that we've had since the 60s. I think it was 62, if I remember correctly. It was sometime in the early 60s where they had a massive Aquarius stellium. But these heavy Aquarius energies are back again. It looks like we're getting a delivery here. I'm always distracted. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of Aquarius business these days. Um, it's interesting to take a step back for a minute to consider that the divisions between signs are. It's one of the things in astrology that's less kind of objectively fixed because you've got the change of the equinoxes and stuff like that. So they're like but the point though, the division between signs is important in how we do astrology because Capricorn will relate to a certain area of your life, and Aquarius relate to a certain area of your life. And personally, I use whole sign house system. So in by treating this sort of switch from one sign to the other, it's like a chapter marker in a way, right? Which it's kind of funny as a philosophical point because there's this kind of question of like, are things like a continuum? Do they kind of blend or transition into each other, or is it like you cross the clear division between one thing into another? And I don't know. If you look at us the way that astrology works, you would think that maybe these clear divisions, the cusps, and this kind of thing are kind of superficial points, but they're actually, in the way it turns out to be astrology, is actually kind of dramatic when you look at what happens. Especially when planets like Mars are changing signs, in the January 6th thing that we had in 2021, when the people stormed the Capitol in America, that all happened when Mars was on one of these, moving from one sign to the other. So a lot of stuff can get built up. Like there's some sort of business that comes to a peak and has to be like, the climax of some kind of resolution or something like that. And especially, I think with Pluto at the end of the sign, that there's a sort of like that kind of added to it of this like kind of confrontation or like showdown with Pluto. Especially when you've got the really confrontational Mars energy with the exalted Mars. I'm almost thinking like about it like in video games where you have like the final boss at the end of the level, but then you go on to the next level and you're like, okay, now we've just beat the Pluto boss. Now we're on the Aquarius level, and now we have to go up against Saturn, right? And it's a different dynamic though, because this time Saturn has the edge over Venus and Mars, so like things are basically going to fall in line to whatever Saturn stands for in this house. And I mean, I couldn't go through and do another 12 sign horoscope video. It takes me some work though, because I sit there with a notebook and I go over each sign and I make notes, and I come back later and I go over it again and try to add stuff. Like it takes me a lot of work to do I could just do it on the fly and but I'm trying to do my best here as an astrologer and put a real effort into it. This morning though, I'm just kind of winging it though to basically communicate the main gist of it. And if you understand the 12 houses, what topic Aquarius stands for in your life, and if you use a not the whole sign house system, but you use quadrant based or Placidus house system, you can try it as well and see how it works. You've got, there's some technicalities which make that different, and it may have different results. But rather than me telling you that whole sign is better, I have more of the attitude that it's up to you to experiment and try things out in astrology and come to your own conclusions and stuff like that. But yeah, the basic principle of a change of topics, there's a change of focus. For example, I'm Scorpio rising, and Capricorn is my third house, and Aquarius is my fourth house in the whole sign. So there's more of a focus now on the actual fourth house topics, especially with the huge stellium in that thing. So if you want to do the work yourself and transpose that to your own chart and see what Aquarius means for you, we're getting a lot of action there, basically. So what does it mean that we have Venus and Mars now in Aquarius, and they're running into Saturn this time? Well, I think we can look at the basic character of Saturn, that in tropical astrology, this is all kind of based around seasonal dynamics. And Saturn gets Aquarius and Capricorn because it's the winter. And I think that there's there's sort of nuances to Aquarius that a lot of people... I see a lot of modern astrologers focusing on stuff to do with, for one thing, groups, social dynamics with air signs. It is a kind of a communicative... It kind of deals with social contracts and it's less, water is more emotional, but it's more of this sort of, like when we're speaking to each other, we're moving air around, right? And ideas kind of like are a little bit abstract. So they're more of this kind of floaty idea kind of place, but it's a little bit more detached from the emotional realities that water deals with. So Aquarius often kind of has this sort of like airy, detached kind of quality, and that is less, it's like on the other side of the zodiac from signs like Leo and Cancer, which are like the warm summer signs. These ones are characterized by this kind of cool winter Saturnian, aloof, kind of detached quality. And so there's something about that which is I don't know, like in Canada here, I'm a kind of person, I like making electronic music and stuff like this, and I'm seeing that finally they're allowed to go out dancing in Canada again. I'm getting over some non-COVID related health problems though, so I'm kind of like trying to work on recovering my own physical, uh, health before I don't want to party too hard or something like this, right? But um, where am I going with this? The Aquarius, the heavy, like when the lockdowns first started, there was uh, the Saturn went to Aquarius, then the Saturn went back into Capricorn. But there's this sort of like detached, like quality that we've been going through this whole time of the coronavirus pandemic, that the feeling of being under limitations, under this sort of like these strict kind of protocols that you have to follow, that and also like you can see people are getting triggered of how they relate to authority figures and the topics of control in their life and limitations and stuff like this. This is all to do with the Saturn archetype, and makes sense astrologically why this would be a prominent issue um, with such strong Saturn energy through this time that we've been going through the pandemic. So even though things are opening up, like I feel like the Aquarius energy is not like quite, it doesn't feel like quite like this sort of like embracing the social kind of in quite the same way. It's more about the sort of, it's a little bit cool and detached rather than being super emotional. But then I mean you also have this Pisces stuff bringing in the more of the that watery quality. But um the which is, I mean, with this video I'm talking about Aquarius. So with the Pisces stuff, you can look to whatever house that is. It's showing up in a different area, but there's a kind of the Pisces is a bit more lush, right? It's more of like getting the precipitation of like the you need to grow the flowers in the spring or whatever, right? Like it's sort of a little bit more nourishing, I think. Whereas Aquarius can be very dry, and it's more about it's less about generosity with that Jupiter thing, and more about this kind of disciplinarian kind of attitude. And I was thinking that I'm not like, I don't want to be too into using tarot to explain my astrology, but I have been getting back into doing tarot readings for myself again, and I've been using the Thoth deck, if I'm saying it right. Toth, is it Toth or Thoth? I don't know. But they have the astrological symbols just like clearly labeled on the cards, and so it's like it's kind of influenced the way that I think about tarot and astrology, even if it's not, it only go the tradition is it doesn't really have ancient traditional basis as far as I am aware. But anyways, what I was thinking about with the Aquarius stuff is that the vibe that I get from Saturn in Aquarius is very much like King of Swords, which is like a very like in the Rider-Waite Smith one, it's just like a guy and he's looking tough with his sword on the throne, and he's like some tough authoritarian you don't want to mess with. And but I'm thinking like if you go back to the tropical thing of see the seasonal effects of tropical astrology, which is, I mean, I don't know, for the southern hemisphere, it doesn't make as much sense. This is the limitations of what we're working with here, but the coolness of Saturn. Saturn was said to be cool because it was the farthest away planet with a visible eye, so it looks dim, especially compared to Jupiter. Like Jupiter is a big, bright, glowing thing when you spot it in the sky, but Saturn is much dimmer, and so it's this dark, dim thing that is associated with the dark, dim time of year, and so there's almost like this kind of like, I guess it's Darth Vader kind of vibe from like Capricorn and Aquarius, right? Like Aquarius bringing out that kind of thing about like the archetype of like a kind of cool mechanical detachment. Like he's like maybe, if you go with the Star Wars thing, like you got little baby Anakin in episode 1 being kind of like a Cancer, little, or like an Aries or something like this, and but then by the time he makes it to the Darth Vader stage, it's like the Saturn has kicked in and it's all black. Like black is also very associated with the planet Saturn, and I think like, yeah, Aquarius, Capricorn could also the black, like people think about Scorpio as representing these dark kind of qualities, but I think that that Saturn in the Saturn ruled signs can have this sort of like, it's that blackness, but also that authoritarian iciness that's just kind of like cool and like cold-hearted even, right? And I think that but that's accented by the Jupiter Neptune and Pisces thing, which is going to be more compassionate. But you've got strong energies playing off those two things right now, because this kind of that kind of cold, steely, serious business thing of Saturn versus me. Jupiter's going to be more indulgent. Jupiter is going to be more permissive, right? Like Jupiter's like the permissive quality, and then the authoritarian, setting limits, setting boundaries quality. The like, it's interesting time right now because these forces are both very strong, that they're really potent energies to work with, but right now there's a bit more of a, all of a sudden, now that we've got Venus and Mars in Aquarius, the Aquarius stuff is more stacked. So that cool, steely, serious Aquarius thing, which is influenced by Saturn being the strong planet in that sign, is going to have a noticeable presence during this time. It's as Mercury moves into Pisces, we're going to have it shift a little bit more into the Pisces side. But right now, you've got you've got Mercury as a serious, cool, steely, intellectual air sign thing going on, and then you're going to see Mercury switch to a more surrealistic, more poetic, more what can I say, transcendent, dealing with stuff that is like, you're trying to communicate something and the words fail you because you're dealing with, crazy mystical weirdness with Pisces, whereas with Aquarius it's more about, like laws and government and, social contracts and stuff like this, right? And all this stuff about pandemics and I mean, there's also all this, the Ukraine stuff is taking more of a focus these days, but that kind of attitude of, I don't know, I'm not going to go there in terms of the whether it's World War III or something. Like I don't know. My kind of attitude is kind of like, with the coronavirus, I honestly was not expecting it to be such a big problem. So I kind of feel like if I was going to say that, like, oh, don't worry about it, I would jinx it. So I'm just gonna say like, I'm just gonna be more neutral on it. Maybe it's a problem, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But the seriousness of it is very much of that Saturn, Aquarius. We're not messing around here. I'm like, I don't know. I'm a Jupiter kind of character, right? So even if I'm talking about serious stuff, I may have more of a jovial quality, but that, yeah, like there's a strict Saturn thing, and and Mars is now not having that exaltation, so it's going to be falling under the rule of law from Saturn, and maybe some of these things like the wars might I don't know, it hit some kind of a wall where there pressures from, whether that's, you know, the sanctions or the different diplomatic efforts, you know, may put a halt to the straight up warfare in Ukraine. Maybe it could also be more a crackdown on protests for the pandemic stuff as well. The thing to remember here, regardless of what your stance is that, I mean, if you're anti-authoritarian, it's not, this particular stretch is not that great for that, I would say, because the authoritarian Saturn thing is pretty strong right now. I mean, you know, anti-authoritarians can have a Saturn thing going for them too, but it's not. It's more of like you're on the other side of the wall, right? Like you join. There's a lot of people who want to like leave society and just like join a hippie commune or something like that, and be like, not deal with the government, and be like, we're free people on our hippie commune and all this kind of stuff. And I think with something like Saturn and Aquarius, it's like, yeah, I mean, you can do that, but if you want to go to Walmart and shop with your mask off and still be a free person, and you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too, you know what I mean? Like, there's a kind of there's one thing that's interesting, I think, about all this pandemic stuff, is that it kind of shows, you know, if people might have an attitude that they want to live beyond the rules of society, that you want to be, you know, an anarchist, a free individual doing your own thing, but then you are upset because you can't go to the food court, right? Like you can't get a Big Mac or something. You know what I mean? It's like you can't. It's like if you want to participate in consumer capitalist society and all this kind of stuff, you have to play by its rules. And if you want to be a complete maverick and live on the fringes of society, you're welcome to try it out. But it's, you know, like, if you want to, it's like, yeah, that's the thing I think with this trucker protests. It's like, okay, if you want to be rebels, go be rebels, but you might not keep your job. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, these right wing people, how they're hard on, whenever there's a leftist protest, there's these guys that are like, you know, go get a job or something like that. And now it's like, oh, well, I don't know. Are you going to be a protester? Are you going to be an activist? Or you're going to work? I don't know. Like, it's like, these are the tensions, I think, around the Saturn dynamic, where which side are you going to be on? Are you going to be working for society, following society's rules, or do you want to go live off grid on Lasqueti Island? That's where we, you know, being a West Coast guy, that's my local thing. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't go on a political rant with this, but I don't know. Like Saturn has to do with oppositions, right? Because Aquarius is opposite from the sun, and Capricorn's opposite from the moon. So there's something that Saturn is in nature oppositional, and then you're running into Venus and Mars have that polar opposite butting heads. But when they run into Saturn, it's like, you know, the buck stops here. Which side of the line are you going to be on, you know, with this conflict? Because it's not going to keep going, right? And then personally, you know, I mean, it's funny almost. It's almost like ironic to be optimistic for Saturn stuff, but there's all this stress that's been around this Venus and Mars conjunction. And in my point of view, once that hits Saturn, it's like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to certain things coming to an end finally. and it's kind of like this thing that if it keeps moving past this Capricorn stuff, there's all this stuff going on with Capricorn and Venus and Mars. Finally, we're over that. And if this stuff keeps going on in Aquarius, you're gonna have Saturn to answer to, and that's gonna be a real, like, you know, the buck stops here. Like, you know, we're not gonna it's not gonna go any farther than that. You know what I mean? And I mean, depends on what you're applying this to. For some people, that might be disappointing. For the way I'm looking at it in terms of what's going on in my own life, I'm like, thank God. This, this, hopefully I don't jinx myself with this though, right? But I can see the positives of Saturn, even though it's traditionally a malefic here, right? I think if there's any way to work with stuff like these malefic planets like Saturn and Mars, is to see how they might be bringing something that might be actually be good. In this sense, I'm optimistic for it, anyways. Okay, so this is my video. I might come back and do another 12 sign horoscope video. I just thought I'd get this one down while the ingress was fresh, right? Okay,